Hey everyone, good morning. It's Wednesday morning, 9:30 on a Wednesday morning, 9:30, and it is time for Innovation Fika. Innovation Fika, and let's see, Instagram is going live over there as well. I can see it, and boom, we're live on Instagram as well. Excellent, fantasticness. Yes. Anyway, yes, fantasticness. My Christmas present, fantasticness. Innovation Fika every Wednesday morning, 9:30 a.m. with me, Donny, sometimes with a guest. Last week I had Nina Rapp here in the studio upstairs. Really cool, Nina, who is an AI evangelist and also a future of work expert, guru, mentor, evangelist. Nina Rapp, check out that episode. All episodes are on LinkedIn, a lot of them on LinkedIn as well, but I'm saving them all on YouTube as well. So this is episode 203, so we have 202 episodes on LinkedIn, of which about 70 or 80 are with guests. So episode 203 of Innovation Fika, a short 30-minute coffee break, and usually reflective, sometimes with a guest, but always with a subject that I think is worth talking about. Today, I'm talking about how to move Europe towards more innovation pull, something I think is really, really important. And it's not just something that, we can make more tech happen if we do this. But I read this essay by an ex-colleague, Ramon Vish. He used to work here at KTH, professor, and he wrote a really good essay about the importance of developing European technology, not only for digital sovereignty, but also out of a perspective that I had not thought of before. But I'll come back to Ramon Base. I will just say good morning, everyone. If anybody, as you come online, just pop a comment in the comments and say hi, good morning, where you're from. It's always nice to get people talking and chatting. So happy to get people live on board as well. Ask questions, comment. This is something that hopefully will, I'm not saying provoke, but at least hopefully it will create some kind of thoughts. I'll actually start off with a quote, or not a quote, but a comment that I had the other day, because the past couple of weeks, I've been saying things like, what if Europe bought more European technology? What if we what if we toned down the funding of only getting more tech out, as in funding new deep tech programs and funding scale-up programs and funding more startups? What if we actually started funding heavily buying and implementing of European technology? And then I had this thought experiment, just playing around with an idea. And I said to somebody, I have been saying to people, what if we, not forced, I'm not saying forced, encouraged take part of the money that we pour into deep tech startup funding and the new scale-up funding, and subsidize procurement of European technology. And as a scenario, let's say, what if the 10 largest organizations in Europe decided to buy European email, cloud, and AI? What would happen then? And it was such an interesting thing, because I posed this question to a person and just a couple of days ago, and their sort of knee-jerk reaction was, "It's not going to work. Everything will break." I was like, "Yeah, but what's going to break? Is your email going to break? I mean, email is just email. You can use any kind of email. It's just a protocol. You don't, it's what's going to break?" Okay, so and it was just such an interesting direct comment to, no, we can't change into something new. Everything will break. Like what we have works. Let's not change anything. I am not underestimating their fears. I fully understand that things will, if we did that, if we came to like if it was like that. But hey, pandemic. I mean, usually the biggest joke in any IT conference is, who's been the biggest key driver of digitalization and technology shift in companies and workplace behavior? Is it the head of IT or is it COVID? Same thing here. If we had, a crisis where suddenly we had to buy European, we'd buy European, then we'd develop European, then we'd develop our own, like any, and I know it's a really bad example, but in other closed infrastructures like China or Russia or other places, they have their own infrastructure, and they run it themselves. I'm just saying that we need to move from, if we want to develop more European technology, we need to have more buyers of European technology. So we need to move from innovation push, because everything we do now is research funding, startup grants, scale-up programs, more deep tech, get more deep tech out. And I'm going, yeah, that's really cool. But one, you're creating a lot more companies, and then of course you need to actually take responsibility for them, not only starting but also surviving, which is something that we've been really bad at. And I'm not saying we should spoon feed people. I'm not saying we're going to have them grant survive, but they have to sell to somebody as well. We can't, we've been just building things and then expecting people to buy them, and then they go to the US and they get funded in the US, and then they become a US company, and then they IPO in the US. And we think that's great, but then we've given away all the IP and it's a US company. And we're happy with that. And now we're seeing lots of money coming into Europe from both North and South, US and also UAE. And, we have a lot of tech being funded and leaving and moving other places. I just think that we should be buying more of our own stuff. I would think we should work more with very, very strategic procurement. I think that we should, the governments should be a lot. The governments have an incredible opportunity to be a innovation buyer. And there's this myth that, Europe is, compared to the US, the US is only the market. I said, no, that's completely wrong. If you compare to the US and China, the governments are extremely big buyers of innovation. The American defense, the Chinese state, it's the Chinese state, for Christ's sake, they subsidize the whole tech sector. Very, very strong buying power from state and government in the US and in China. And of course, yes, a huge private market as well, because everybody can make a lot of money because they have, each have one very, very big unified market where one product can sell across, in the US, 320 million people, and in China over, add another billion to that. So, it's enormous markets with, one currency and one language. Whereas in Europe, we're super fragmented. We have 27 markets. We have a lot of different currencies. We don't have one stock exchange. We have every sort of major startup scale up has to start, scale, and at least exit nationally. You can't exit in Europe. You exit in Sweden, Germany, or Finland, or whatever, on respective stock exchanges. So it's a very fragmented market. So that's one thing, creating more buying power. And then I think that the risk, going from risk minimizing to opportunity maximizing is another really interesting shift mindset wise. Is, how can we move to a more mindset of instead of, oh no, what if this breaks, thinking, oh wow, what if this works? I think that is going from risk minimizing mindset to opportunity maximizing mindset is a big thing, and understanding or finding ways of making that work. If we really wanted to support European technology development, we should really, really support buying European technology and not expect anybody else to buy European technology. Who is anybody else? Who do we expect? So we can't just push things out and then hope that somebody's going to buy it. That's the developing part. But then there's a really interesting sort of systematic angle that I mentioned Ramon Viss in the beginning of the of my Fika of the conversation here, and he had a really interesting angle of it, and it was that the thing was all of the infrastructure, AI especially. I mean, that's AI has sort of accelerated everything. There are, a couple. There's only a couple now. There's Claude, and there's Gemini, and there's ChatGPT. I mean, there's more or less 3 actors have concentrated all AI capabilities, which means that they're all American, they're all US. China has their own, and we have one which is struggling to keep up. And the thing is, the interesting thing with those companies is that being a US company, usually they amount, they of course they make lots of money. Well, they're not, but they're trying to make lots of money. But they are also, they don't pay taxes at all usually, which is, and they definitely don't pay taxes in Europe. So we're putting all of our sort of infrastructure eggs in a basket, which will never ever come back to Europe. I mean, if we had European companies that, and I'm not saying that we should tax things to death. I'm just saying that taxes is a really great thing to keep things going. And if we only use infrastructure, AI, I mean the basic stuff. I'm not going into like deep tech research based stuff. I'm saying that the stuff that everybody uses, that we pay a lot of money for, and that kind of runs our companies. I'm talking about AI now. I'm talking about email. I'm talking about cloud infrastructure. I'm talking about apps. I'm talking about, everything that we use is super concentrated. Everything is American. Everything is US. We're pouring money into the US and time as well in all of our usage. And of course, all of our information as well. And nothing comes back to Europe when it comes to companies that are actually being built and making money on it. Some companies, of course, some European companies, of course, build their apps on top of that infrastructure. But then of course, the irony is that they either get funded by US companies and then they move to the US and they become the American company, or they find some tax haven in Europe, like Luxembourg or somewhere else, and they need to pay. Don't take taxes so easy. I mean, like lots of Swedish big companies and European companies in general. But as long as they have employees in Europe, fine, then I guess there's, but that's something to look at, the whole sort of platform dependency. It's like a strategic autonomy thing, I think is, we talk a lot about digital sovereignty, which is, yes, an interesting thing. A European tech, at least, I think, is important. We're not saying we should have 27 different tech platforms, but we could at least have a European joint platform where we make sure that everything kind of stays in Europe. Here's the thing. Here's kind of a, here's kind of a, not a breaking point, but do we actually want Europe to succeed? I mean, really, are we serious about creating a unified Europe that can hold its own against US and China and other continents? Then we need to take the consequence of that and become a united Europe. It's it's kind of that we talk a lot about, we want to be Europe and Europe has to do this and Europe has to be strong. But then when we actually look at what that means and call it sacrifices then, what changes we actually have to put in place to make that work, then so it's all sort of, oh well, we didn't really mean that, and I'm not prepared to do that, and people aren't really, they don't mind thinking a lot, but they're not always into giving as much. And I'm not pointing out any companies or countries or any parties. And I'm just saying that all of us in Europe, we're kind of in the same situation there. We're kind of all as bad, more or less when it comes to that. But anyway, coming back to the argument then, when it comes to buying more European tech, I think that's one of the key drivers of getting European tech to become more independent. We have to not only push out more European tech, we also have to pull out more European tech. So that means things like, subsidizing switching costs. If a large organization with 10,000 employees wants to switch to European tech, let's subsidize that. Let's say we will, heck, the Chinese government have subsidized industries for 20 years. I mean, they killed the solar market, solar cell market. They killed the battery market. Goodbye Northvolt and everybody else. And now they're killing the EV market. State subsidized tech development. So, and again, I'm not saying we should grant spoon feed things so they don't make money. I'm saying we should put the money in the other end. So instead of funding pilots and have people apply for money to run their scale-ups and startups, we should apply companies that can buy technology from startups. So putting the money in the other end. So subsidize switching costs. So if a large company with 10,000 employees say, we want to support European technology, they can then apply for a innovation procurement or buying grant, deployment grant, a European innovation deployment grant to switch their 10,000 users from, say, Microsoft Exchange and Office infrastructure into something European. Why not? Why not? What's the problem? Why not? And the same goes with other kinds of European technology as well. And I don't see why not. I mean, it's everybody else is doing that, so why shouldn't we do that as well? And then, of course, things like, it's really strange. I mean, we've had this European free workforce mobility thing, and then suddenly now we're kicking people out. All of the right-wing parties have gotten their act together, especially in Sweden. That's terrible. And it's like, oh, we have to throw people out. And it's like, yeah, but why are we throwing the ones that actually have got a job and have studied and are doing PhDs? Aren't those the ones that we would want to have stay? If somebody has proven that they want to work hard 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, pay their taxes, and really become a solid citizen, isn't that something that we should bet on instead of saying, oh, well, we don't want you here? I mean, I know a lot of, and this is me, this is personal. I'm holding this, no more logotype here. This is me personally. I know a lot of Swedes that happily don't pull their weight. And I know a lot of foreigners that very happily pull their weight. So, don't go Swedish, non-Swedish on me. It's people versus people. Lucas, I agree with a lot of great European and open source alternatives. Yes, we need to make the cut. Yes, of course. It's going to hurt. Of course it hurts. All change hurts. That's, it's just thing like that. Again, public procurement, big governmental procurement is a huge thing. They can be a big buyer of innovation, of course. And again, putting the money in the other end. It might sound oversimplified, but I think that if we get the buying, buy European instead of build European, which is kind of a consequence of buy European. Because if the thing is, if the market demand grows, then the natural thing is to build for that. It's not even protectionism. It's like just strengthening our own fragile system. It would be great if we had really strong infrastructure companies in Europe serving European large companies. Why not? So I mean, I think some of the key questions here are that, so if I'd like to ask, maybe I should do this. Maybe I should ask like 10 or 20 or 30 large organizations in Europe and say, would you switch to European tech if there was a full, a worthy, a fully alternative that was completely filled all the criteria? That's number one. If not, why not? Okay, so if it's hard and you think it's going to cost, would you switch if the switching was subsidized? If there was a pan-European subsidization program that subsidized the switch to European tech, would you switch then? And then, of course, are we prepared to pay the price for doing this? As Lucas said, of course, making the cut is going to hurt, but I think in the long run, just as Lucas also pointed out, in the long run, it's a win. Of course, it's a win. It's a win for European technology. So you win. I mean, we would then be struggling to catch up with everybody who was trying to buy our technology. I think that's. And coming back to the quote, not the quote, but the comment that I had in a couple of days ago when I said to somebody, as this example, I said, what if we, just as a scenario, if the 10 largest organizations decided overnight to switch off US tech and switch on European tech, what would happen? And as I said, the comment I got back was, everything will break, nothing's going to work, which is a really, really it's a tell of how we see, moving in, changing things, that we always assume it's going to hurt and break and be bad, instead of saying, let's switch. Why, if we have the mindset, why don't we switch into something better? Everybody's complaining about their tech somehow. So then why don't we have them switch into something that works better? Why do they have to assume that it's going to be worse? I mean, isn't that what innovation is? Creating value creation, making something better, not making something worse. That's not innovation. That's just, I won't call people names, but anyway, that's a bad way of doing stuff. So I'd say that, we have the whole thing going when it comes to the funding mechanisms. We have the startup programs. Everybody's running for startups. And there's another thing that I was traveling the past 2 days, and we're talking about the whole startup ecosystem. And another thing is that, we have this. That's another pet peeve I have, is I feel that we've been having a sucky KPI where we're only saying how many startups have you started, and I mean that's a kind of a sucky KPI, because starting something is super easy, but surviving and growing is really, really hard. So better KPIs, harder KPIs though, is to say how many scaling companies that survive, that over 5 years have 100 employees do you have. That's a really hard KPI to reach. It's a really much harder to measure, but it is a lot better when it comes to longevity and actual value creation in the system than just saying, how many startups have you started? I mean, I can start 10 startups the coming 2 weeks. None of them will survive, but I will have 10 more, 10 more things to count in my quota, which is stupid way of counting the whole. But that's a different, that's for my next Innovation Fika. But again, talking about coming back to moving from innovation push to innovation pull, putting the money in the other end. If we had strong buying power, if we really are serious about building European strength, then we also need to align the pan-European buying power, the pan-European capital markets, the pan-European things like stock exchange, IPOs, scale exits in Europe, and stop companies flipping and going to Delaware and becoming American companies, because they don't even understand then that they become American companies when they do that. And so I mean, that's this week's little Innovation Fika musing, based on a musing I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago as well. It's an article on LinkedIn that you can read about, and I will recommend Ramon this article on the topic as well. He was more about the whole the tax part and the systematic part. Really, really, really interesting perspective on what I'm talking about as well. with that, my dear friends, I will say thank you very much for today. Thanks for being online with me. Thanks for joining, and keep the comments going. Happy to hear what you think as well in the comments. And maybe you'll catch this at a later stage. I mean, it's on LinkedIn, it's on YouTube. Feel free to comment. I will pick up any comment and answer as well. And this is something I really care about. So I really want to move forward. I think maybe I should do some interviews with some large companies, European companies, and start asking them about this whole idea of buying European. And if you know anybody that develops European tech that could be alternatives to the big infrastructure technology that we use today, that is all American or wherever it comes from, then let me know. Let me know. Let's start a campaign or something on this. Okay, cool. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. See you next week, 9:30 a.m. Innovation Fika. Bye for now.